Chapter 27. The night before my sister's wedding in Rwanda, we attended a big party to celebrate the giving away of the bride. Our elders told stories, kids danced, and women cooked an entire cow. At the party, you're supposed to eat a whole cow. I saw relatives I had not seen since I was a child, and I met some new ones I had never seen before. Because my family now lived in America, everyone assumed we were rich, which I thought was funny. A few people asked us for bus fare. I relished seeing the familiar faces of my relatives, and I essentially met my grandparents for the first time. I could not remember meeting them in the mountains when I was a baby. I met my grandpa on my dad's side and my grandma on my mom's side. The others had passed away. It was fascinating to spend time with my grandparents and see where my parents got their personalities. My grandmother looked very much like my mom, and I could also see where my mom got her strength. Grandma had raised 4 daughters and 4 sons, and she was a true matriarch. Her husband had died after my mom got married, and she cared for the family on her own. Mom had once told me that when Grandma was raising her kids, she hadn't really seen the logic in educating girls. She thought they would just get married and take their knowledge to another family. That was the way her generation thought. Simply part of the culture. But years later, after Mom started her own business and put all her girls through school, encouraging us to learn and grow, Grandma said that she could see the value in girls. It was a big moment for Mom. Grandma was funny and sarcastic like Mom too. The first thing she said when she met me, "Oh, you turned out short." And then, "I wasn't sure you were going to grow up to be pretty." I said, "Grandma, you just met me." My grandfather was just like my dad, sweet and serene. He told me that he had been following my activism. A radio show in Congo had discussed my appearance at the Women in the World Summit, and he had heard it in his village. Such a small world. "We hear about all the good things you're doing for our community," he said. However, he joked that I had also caused some problems for him. The people in his village thought he must be rich since his granddaughter was hobnobbing with American celebrities. "Since you're so wealthy, I bought a bag for you to fill with money," he said with a laugh. "I'll bring it back to the village." I was pleasantly surprised by his support of my activism. Like my grandmother, he had once believed that girls did not need to be educated. He had worried that my mom was too educated for my dad when they wed. And of course, she had attended school for just a few years. But clearly he had evolved, just like my grandma. Princess's wedding was immense, with hundreds of people arriving. Everyone always brings their entire family, all their cousins and aunties and uncles, to the ceremony, no matter how many people you invite. I wore a peachy silk bridesmaid's dress and beaded necklace. I had such a phenomenal time. I did not want to go home. But I had to get ready for college. That fall, I packed my bags and left for Houghton College, a Christian university not far from home in New York. My sister Princess had gone there, so we knew the school well. My parents liked the idea that I would be close to home. They would have preferred that I live at home and commute to school, but I wanted to live on campus. It was time for me to go. At first, I loved it. Away from home for the first time, I felt independent. I had a roommate named Meredith, a quiet, sweet person, the perfect roommate, almost too perfect. I quickly met an African girl wearing awesome braids, petite and cute. She said her name was Mary Louise. She had been adopted by a missionary couple on the Ivory Coast. I started calling her Nugget, a nickname my sisters had once given me. Before long, everyone called her Nugget. She introduced me to a girl in my dorm named Shannon, and we became friends right away. Shannon had grown up in a conservative Christian family in a small town near Rochester. She had recently reconnected with her dad after a difficult divorce. Tall, a bit shy and clumsy, she was incredibly warm and friendly, with kind eyes and a big smile.
This is the end of the disc.
I met another good friend in a digital imaging class. The professor had told us to find a subject and go take some portraits. I looked at this gorgeous girl named Kaya, who had midnight black hair, pale skin, blue eyes. We left the class together to find subjects for our portraits, and nabbed some boys in the hall who were game. An artist from California, she seemed free-spirited and fun. We soon became inseparable. A guy named Philip rounded out my eclectic group of friends. He was the openly gay son of a pastor from Pennsylvania, and I met him through a mutual friend one day when we needed a ride off campus. Philip had a car and offered to drive us, and I sat with him up front. He asked me to feed him jelly beans as we drove, and a friendship was born. I made friends easily, in part because Princess had gone to the school, but also because people recognized me from choir performances we had held there over the years. The campus newspaper had also run a piece about my appearance at the Women in the World Summit, so some people knew about my history before I met them. Strangers would come up to me and say, "Hi Sandra," as if they knew me already. Other times, random people would approach and give me a hug. I knew nothing about them, but they knew something about me. I wasn't sure if I wanted my past to be the first thing people knew about me. I realized I couldn't introduce myself like a regular person and let people get to know me. But I also knew that this was a result of my activism, and it was a new reality I needed to accept. It happened to my mom too. One day she came to visit the campus and was in a public bathroom when a student approached her and said, "Are you Sandra's mom?" Mom nodded, and the girl gave her a big hug and started to cry. Mom was totally mystified. She didn't know much English, and she had no idea what was going on. Later she said, "Sandra, what did you do? Why did this girl hug me and start crying?" I had to explain that the girl must have heard about our past, presumably from my appearance at the summit. My activism had caught the attention of some men in my culture too. Some of the older men were concerned that a young woman was speaking for our tribe. I didn't see it that way. I was just telling my story in the hopes that it would help people understand my experience. But the men weren't sure what to think. They would call my dad and ask about what I planned to say in my next speech. I had begun talking to refugee groups, and I posted details about the events on Facebook. The men did not think I was qualified. They saw me as a child. Dad relayed the messages to me, but told me not to worry. "Do what you want. Say what you want," he said. No one in my family ever tried to direct what I said. Sometimes they would give me advice. For instance, Mom once suggested that I explain that there was no one to protect us from the attackers in the refugee camp, but they let me find my own voice. The younger generation of my tribe, meanwhile, totally cheered me on. On campus, I developed a brief romance with a guy who was a tattoo artist named Xavier. He was a lost soul, and we connected because I was a bit lost too at the time. Xavier gave me a tiny tattoo of a black heart on my collarbone, and I loved it. I had always wanted a tattoo, and I was finally free to get one. I picked a black heart because it reflected my innermost thoughts, that everything I held dear was tinted and dark. I managed to hide the tattoo from my parents when I saw them on the weekends, until one Sunday at church. I wore a blouse that revealed the heart. A woman at church noticed it and said, "That's so cute." She turned to my mother, telling her how adorable it was. Thanks a lot. I don't know why she needed to point it out to my mom. Mom looked at it and said, "No." She reached out and tried to rub it off. "Mom, let's not get angry," I said. "The tattoo is there. It's not going away." She sighed heavily. My poor mom. I dragged her through hell with my American ways. Eventually, life on campus got complicated. The majority of students were white, and again there was a racial divide. I first encountered it with a girl named Angel in my dormitory. She was white, like most girls in the dorm. I didn't know her except to say hello when we crossed paths on campus. One day she was crying in the hallway. I asked her if she was okay, and she looked at me strangely. She actually said these words, "Can I touch you?" She said she had never touched a black person. I humored her and let her touch me. She closed her eyes and announced while stroking my arm, "Wow, if I close my eyes, it's like you're white." She was astonished that my skin felt like hers. I laughed and said, "Do not ever try that with any other black kids. They will not be amused. They will knock you flat." Then she wanted to touch my hair, which was in braids. Again, I said, "Do not try any of these things with other black kids." She had come from a tiny rural town with no black people. It would be the first of many such incidents for me on campus. I had been looking forward to college because I thought I would be meeting a diverse range of people. I was excited to be independent and to experience life without my parents' watchful eyes. I wanted to make new friends, to feel like an average American teen. I was finally out of high school, so the "no boys until you graduate" rule from my parents had been lifted, and my brother Alex was not around to shoo away every boy who coughed in my direction. But I quickly realized that there was a definite type at Houghton. White skin, long, beautiful hair, everything that I didn't have. For the most part, white boys liked white girls, and black boys liked white girls. There was no space for my dark skin. I had male friends of both races, but I felt more like an accessory to enhance their coolness factor than a pretty girl they could ask out on a date. One day I called my mother, sobbing. She asked me what was wrong, and I had no answer for her. I didn't know what was wrong. I thought that if I told her I didn't feel beautiful, she would find it silly and dismiss it. Instead of sharing my feelings, I cried and told her I missed home. One night at a college dance, I was talking with a cute boy, but then a flirty girl swooped in and pulled him away. I knew her, and I had thought she was a friend, although I could see she was self-absorbed. Her name was Donna, and she thought she was hot. She thought she was all that in a bag of chips. She whisked the guy off and started dancing with him. And that was the end of that short-lived romance for me. It was also the end of my friendship with her. Later, I met a white guy who seemed interested in me, until he said, "Sandra, you're so pretty for a black girl." What? There's a difference between pretty black girls and pretty white girls? I wish I had said, "Wow, you're pretty stupid for a college student." He hurt me with his remark. He didn't see me, just my skin color. But my friends were there for me. When they heard what he said, they stopped talking to him. I had heard similar comments about my looks before. I was learning about shades of black in America, and about higher skin tone determines where you stand on the beauty scale. Americans are so nutty about physical appearance and what defines beauty. Basically, the lighter skinned you are, and the smaller and straighter your nose is, the prettier you are. I also began to understand why hair is such an important issue for African American women. I learned why the black girls in school didn't let their hair grow naturally, but instead always straightened or relaxed it. My black friends explained that since they were already considered second tier to white women in the looks department, it was important not to have unruly hair. Black hair in its natural state is nappy and disorderly, they told me. They said, "You can't have your natural hair out." They said black women have to keep their hair tidy and straight like white women if they want to be taken seriously at work and in school. Again, I said, "What? This is crazy." These were issues I never had to deal with in Africa. There, my sisters and I wore our hair short and never gave it a second thought. We didn't have to worry about natural hair versus straightened hair. We didn't worry about our hair at all. But in America, it was a very big issue. And so, in order to fit in, as all teens want to do, I usually wore my hair in braids or straightened it with chemicals, sometimes burning my scalp if I left the chemicals on for too long. I didn't understand how the hair that grew out of my head could be considered messy. I occasionally wore my hair out in its natural state, big and puffy. I've come to love my hair, but at the time, when I wore it as an afro, it sparked a lot of unwanted conversation. People thought I was making a statement when I was simply wearing my natural hair. They would examine it and say things like, "Do you tease your hair? Oh, your hair's so cool. Can I touch it? Oh, wow. How do you get your hair to do that?" White girls would sink their hands in my afro and smile as if they were petting me. Not only did they make me feel like an exotic animal, but they also messed up my hair. How would they feel if I ran my fingers through their hair? It was easiest to wear braids. I didn't have the time or money to spend hours straightening my hair before class. Braids are easy to maintain, but they do hurt like mad for a few days until they settle. The first night after you have them done, you have to find a creative way to sleep, such as on your forehead. Of course, people thought I was making a statement by wearing braids too. They thought everything about my appearance was a statement. When I was simply wearing clothes, going to class, doing my daily routine, I really stuck out at Houghton. If I wore one of my African skirts or dresses, people would look me up and down and say things like, "Oh wow, what's the occasion? You look like an African goddess." I wanted to say, "Come on now, it's just a skirt. It's not revolutionary." I know that people meant well. I tried to laugh it off. Sometimes I just said, "Yeah, I am an African goddess." To help us all understand one another, I became president of the Black History Club on campus. We decided to do a photo exhibit with some of the Black students to help people get to know us a little better. We took portraits and did brief write-ups for everyone. Little introductions with a few details about our lives and interests. We called the exhibit Shades of Black. When the exhibit opened, an idiot student decided it would be hilarious to change his sign to 50 Shades of Light Black and drape paper chains all over the walls and nod to the book 50 Shades of Grey. But when the Black students came in and saw the chains, as you can imagine, they felt incredibly insulted. We were trying to honor Black students, and someone had filled the room with symbols of slavery. The kids started crying. I went to the dean. He knew me by now. I had spoken to him before about inappropriate comments on campus and ways to make minorities feel more at home. When I arrived at his office, I could see from the look on his face that he was thinking, "Uh-oh, what now?" I told him about the chains strung across the portraits. I explained that this was devastating for the Black students on campus. I said, "What are we going to do about this?" To add to the urgency, I said we needed to do something before everyone started tweeting about it. School officials promptly looked at the campus security cameras and figured out who did it, although they didn't release the student's name immediately. It was a white boy. He had to apologize and he got suspended, but that didn't feel like enough. The student did something that he thought his peers were going to find funny. This was a small manifestation of a much larger issue on campus. These kinds of antics were not what I expected from my college experience. After that, I called my mom and burst into tears. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Do you want to come home?" "Mom, I don't want to be here," I said. "I don't think they like Black people." "We can come get you," she said. I'm sure she was confused. She knew I never had any problems making friends. Suddenly, I didn't feel like getting into all the details with her. I didn't want to worry her, and I didn't want her to think I couldn't handle college. I calmed down and said I would be fine. I really wanted to leave the school, but I stayed. Someone had to push for change. I got more involved. I joined a committee with the dean and others to establish a diversity program. We held a range of cultural events, like a soul food night, a movie night with films about civil rights movements, a Caribbean night, a Motown dance. Our goal was to show people diversity within the Black community. We also held weekly meetings to talk about current issues, and everyone was welcome to come and ask questions. It helped me survive my freshman year, but a much bigger battle was yet to come.